Prerna, have you joined?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Saurabh, shall we start? Vivek sir has joined.
Yes. Good evening, Rachna and others.
Good evening, Bhaiya. Good
Good
evening.
evening, Vivek. Vivek. Hello. Yes. चलो स्टार्ट करते हैं.
पापा कौन आप क्या कर रहे हो एस से कौन है एस
I think we can wait for 5 minutes if the participants are joining, isn't it?
I think in between, while following certain rituals, they would start. They would be
Yes.
finally, I think, the part of the program. Okay.
True.
1 or 2 minutes more, then we can start. Yes.
पापा खाली 8 लोगों ने ज्वाइन किया खाली 8 लोगों ने ज्वाइन किया
Prerna, you can start the program. Meanwhile, the participants who may join, but it's time, so you should start now.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
A very good evening, everyone. I'm Prerna Shingupta, currently pursuing my BA in English, and I'm one of the 5 founding members of Spectrum. Let us start off our third day with a quotation that was said by an Indian yogic guru and spiritual leader, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. According to him, homosexuality has never been considered a crime in Hindu culture. In fact, Lord Ayappa was born of Hari Hara, who are Vishnu and Shiva. It is not a crime in any smriti. Everyone has male and female elements. According to their dominance, tendencies show up and may change. Nobody should face discrimination because of their sexual preferences. Let us start our session by welcoming our first eminent speaker today, Dr. Vivek Singh. Dr. Vivek Singh is an assistant professor of English at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. He received his graduation and post-graduation degree from Banaras Hindu University. For his MPhil degree, he went to Pondicherry University in Pondicherry, and he pursued his PhD from the University of English and Foreign Languages situated in Hyderabad. For his excellence in research, he received the DAAD Fellowship. He was at Potsdam University, Germany, for a semester to pursue research. He joined as an assistant professor of English at Aligarh Muslim University in Aligarh in 2014. He went to Berlin to deliver a lecture and discussed his views on minor cosmopolitanism. He has already delivered more than 20 lectures in various reputed institutions, published more than 7 papers in international journals, and contributed articles in edited books. He has edited a book titled The Crisis of Humanity in 2022, and his forthcoming book is The Discourse of Disability, Indian Perspectives. He has also contributed to framing the course module for English language teaching at NCERT. His title of discussion today is The Liquid Body and Anxiety and Undecidability. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Prerna. Before I start my discussion, I would like to thank uh, Professor Alka Singh, Dr. Saurabh Bhaiya, and Dr. Rachna Pandey for giving me this initiative to speak on the liquid body, anxiety, and undecidability. Before I come to the lecture, I would like to give my round of applause for the coming students from VCW Rajghat who thought of establishing a Spectrum Club, and I'm pretty sure that as far as my understanding goes, am I audible, Rachna or Prerna?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you're
Mayur, you
audible.
are audible.
Thank you. So, like they could come up with such a wonderful ideas that they are going to establish a Spectrum Club LGBTIQ plus in the college, which, in my understanding, is a first time initiative in the entire India. I'm not saying that there is no such department as such. What I'm saying that there is a specific club in a particular institutions where the courses are taught. However, there is no such club which is open to discuss the discourse of minority identities. So I am really very happy and excited to see how it's going to unfold itself in a further, I mean, years. And obviously, it has not been possible without the help of our respective friends. Like, say, for example, Saurabh Bhaiya, Rachna, and everball Professor Alka Singh, who is always ready to take any initiative, and she has taken to the college to the new stream altogether. So I have been listening the talk of Ruth Vanita, and then yesterday also engaged with the discussion which was started by Saurabh Bhaiya and others. What was tickling me, and that is why I changed the entire discourse which I wanted to speak to you. One, the first half I'm going to speak on the discourse of disability and homosexuality, and the second half I'm going to actually reflect on the certain problems which have been happening in past uh, certain years in relation to LGBTIQ. So let me share the slides. So is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Is it visible, right?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you. So the title is The Liquid Body, Anxiety and Undecidability. First, we go on the introduction of it. Let me have a reflection on what I mean by the idea of the liquid body. See, before we get into the discourse of a body, we are supposed to understand that how the idea of the body has been understood so far. So here it comes. So far, what people have been trying to do, they have hesitated to associate the idea of any identity or any minority identity with disability. The reason is they found that disability is something is not fall under the category of different identities, and which is why they realize that if we are fighting for certain rights, certain ideas, so if we associate themselves with the identity of disability, they won't be able to fight rightly. However, the point what I'm trying to contest here, that even any minority identity, and understand one thing, that so far what we have been discussing in the entire cultural studies or coming discourses, either it's a women's studies or Dalit identities or any minority identity that you take, the symbolic association with disability will be able to do justice with any rights or any exclusive demands that you are looking for. The point number one, that disability is not something that is a different category. However, it is very much a real condition of a life. What I mean by the real condition of a life, it simply means that, let's say for example there is an idea of a black, let's say for example there is an idea of a Dalit, let's say for example there is an idea of a women. If you see at the beginning, they all are a different category. but they all can at one point of time fall under the idea of a disability. So saying that disability is something outside, it is, we cannot associate ourselves with the disability identity is something I would have a reservation. The second point what I want to make is that so far we have been thinking about that there are certain intervention by the medical model, which mean that even it is very true in case of homosexuality. What I mean by it's very true in case of homosexuality, that so far people have been looked at homosexuality as a disease. In fact, uh, when I was engaging myself with the discourse of homosexuality, there are a lot of people they called it, and it's very funny. They called it that it's a called something called a truti. In Hindi, it's a called truti. In English, it's a called error. Every culture has a truti, that is the perception of homosexuality from the outside, which means it is the medical discourse that could establish the very idea that homosexuality is not a deviant. In addition to that, it's a more like a disease which has to be cured, and then only it can be incorporated in the society. So that's a one model. Before that, what we had something called religious model. What I mean by religious model is simply that the way in a biblical traditions, or as any particular traditions, it has been perceived. So far, in most of the discourses, if you notice that people look at it as a sin, which means that you committed certain sin in the past and the punishment that you are getting, and which is why the life that you have got this year or this birth, you are supposed to pay the price, the sin that you committed in the last year. The third problem is that we have got the social model. What I mean to say that people are so far are trying to correct the outside society, which means that they think that there is something wrong with the society, not with the individual body as such. See, why I'm talking about these three models, either it is a religious model, or let's say medical intervention, or let's say, for example, social interventions. I'm talking about these three models because generally what we personally realize that every model is going to justify or bring the justice for a particular minority identity. However, they fail to understand that any model that you pick up, or let's say, for example, any methodology through which you think that that is not going to be right, this is going to be right, they all are going to produce the idea of normativities. And which is why either it is a religious model, or it is a social model, or it is a medical model, they all produced something called normativities. And which is why, in fact, yesterday Saurabh Bhaiya was talking about the capitalism, and I was thinking of constantly that the problem cannot be addressed as long as we are coming up with certain models and trying to address the issues. Because until we question the very discourse of normativities, we are not able to bring anything new. And that is why the disabled body, when I'm saying disabled body, let me make it more clear for us that I'm not presuming a person who is impaired is a disabled. That's a mistake we commit when we presume that someone who does not have a leg or does not have a hand is a disabled. That is why I said that every minority identity symbolically like to associate themselves with the disability, because disability is something called a condition in which every minority identity is going to fall today or tomorrow. So that's a one point, and I'm requesting my students to take it further. The second point, what I'm making, that when I'm saying disability or let's say disabled body, you can replace it with any minority identity. Let's say, for example, homosexual body as a disabled body. Let's say, for example, Dalit body as a disabled body. Take any minority identity, you can replace with the disability identity, and disability discourse will be able to do justice with that particular identity. So the reason is that, and I will, that is how I will justify that why I have kept or placed the title as a liquid body. So the reason is that disabled body has been so far pathologized. When I'm saying pathologized, understand this. Let's say, for example, if we go into the modern discourse, the people were black, the black people were considered as a deformed one. So they were, at one point of time, they were segregated on the basis that they are not supposed to have a black skin, or something, there is something wrong with the body. When we say something there is a wrong with the body, it again fall in the criteria of disability identity. Homosexual body homosexual body was considered initially, not I'm talking about even today, if you go into the medical science, they talk about widely that there is something not to be accepted. So even homosexual body is a disabled body in the reason that they are looked as if they have a certain particular disease, which means they are part of a medical institutions and they must be cured, or put it comma, corrected. So this is where I'm talking about that when I'm saying disability or lesser disabled body, you can replace it with any minority identity, and that be like we will be able to do justice with this. Going to the next slides. So, so the point is that as long as we are trying to find out a particular model, any particular model, we are going to give rise to its own normativities. And which is why either it is a religious model or a medical model, or you get away with the social model, we are supposed to come up with something called heuristic method, which means that with our own experience, what we are going through, that be able to do justice. And which is why through the heuristic method, one can analyze how normativities have developed, or it can be a significant point to rethink about minority identity. So the status, the meaning associated with disability is relational. So it does not has any autonomous standing. So when I was listening to even Ruth Manita ma'am, so Ruth Manita ma'am was trying to justify, and so what I'm saying that I prepared the slides like last night, keeping in the mind the kind of discourses we are entering into and what I want you to take forward. So when I was listening to her, she was trying to make a point that every culture, or let's say the like Indian culture, had homosexuality from the beginning itself. It's not the Western import. So what she wanted to say, in other way, if I have to say, that every minority identity, there is something called a meaning which is associated, which means it's not something natural that you got birth and you were born with a particular identity. It simply means that there are certain cultural meaning which are associated time and again. So therefore, when we go back, let's say for example, we say that in India we had homosexuality and now people are denying this. The point is that the very idea of denial stands on the logic that they are too much preoccupied with the thought of a medical understanding. And as long as they are they have grappled that this is something called distinction between healthy body and diseased body. So far we are making this distinction, and that was not possible. So which if you see, if you go back 18th century or 16th or 15th century, when there was no medical intervention, when I'm saying medical intervention, I mean medical institutions. Or let's say for example, is birth of a clinic. The birth of clinic, it's not that you are not taking medicine, it's about medical institutions. So the problem is not about medicine. The problem is more about how the idea of medicine is institutionalized. So far, when we are proceeding further and after the medical intervention, what we interestingly find that everybody has been defined the way medical institution has thought about it. So it has got a certain cultural meaning associated with homosexuality, and therefore, so far people started presuming that people with homosexual body or people with disability is something called a disease, and that is where the problem starts. So that is a second point. What is another interesting point you have to think about is this, that disability, homosexuality, Dalit identity, any particular identity that you think of is constituted, which means that through certain historical meaning, certain cultural meaning, it has got its definition. And as we are going to visit certain culture, certain history, certain political or mythological parameters, what we interestingly find that there are certain body has been contaminated. And which is why this idea of the otherness of a disability, which means that I'm sure that you all are familiar with the discourse called the self and the other. So that is where I'm bringing up the otherness of disability is disordering otherness, which means that there is a strict imposition of normative categories on certain bodies. So if you fall to follow that normative categories, so therefore you will be considered as a deviant. So this presence of a so-called anomalous body, when I'm saying, like, you can underline this idea of called anomalous body. And I mean, there was a point of time when there was a women also considered as an anomalous body. They make normative healthy body uncomfortable and exposes its vulnerability. And that is where the problem starts with. The problem starts with the reason that why a society has to exclude a particular body. The reason is that they realize that they are going to make us uncomfortable. Let me give you an example, and I'm asking you to think for a second. Imagine a body called conjoined twins, right? I wanted to show you pics, but I thought that it will take a lot of time and I have to speak a lot about other discourses as well. So imagine for a second conjoined twins where you see that there are two bodies attached to each other, like even from the birth. How do you look at the body? Even that is the question which I ask in my classrooms, that why is it happen when we see something which we are not normally expected to see and we feel uncomfortable. And which is where the idea comes. Let's say, for example, we can think about the idea of staring. Why do we stare someone, right? Think for a second. The idea of staring is two things. So one, we are fascinated. One, there's an idea called a fascination. And we also stare because we want to dominate. So most of the time, people miss the entire meaning of these two ambiguous meaning, which means that when you are looking at something and screen, you are fascinated about that particular, whatever you are staring, particular body if you are staring. And the second, you are also trying to dominate. You try to dominate because you want to impose normative categories. Second idea is that our visual landscape is not comfortable with certain things, and we want to accustom ourselves by looking at this and making the particular body associated with certain things which we want to see it every day. So the idea what I want to make it, the exclusion of certain minority identity is not because there is something wrong with that particular identity, but the idea is that there is something wrong with our self itself, right? So the problem is not with the outside, it's not with the body that we are observing, we are having a perception of it, but the problem lies that we ourselves have a problem. It's the self which we are constantly. I'll talk about the laka in a minute. So when we are progressing, when we are growing, so we are under the pressure that we are supposed to reach to that ideal perfectibility, which means that there is an ideal image in your mind and which you want to reach to. And when you see constantly that you are not able to reach to, you constantly try yourself. So what this disabled body do, which means that certain bodies which you call anomalous bodies or deviant bodies, which makes you uncomfortable, it tells you that, hey, look, you cannot be perfect. You are one among us. You are just trying to hide what you are. So which is why what the idea is that this otherness disability is a disordering otherness within the social body. And there is a constantly strict imposition of normative categories. So this presence of so-called anomalous body makes normative healthy body uncomfortable and exposes its vulnerability. And that's the point what I wanted to make, that the reason that while a lot of bodies, either it is you tag as anomalous or unhealthy or diseased body, they are constantly kept outside of so-called the order of society. The reason is that they realize that if they keep they remain inside, if they remain inside the boundaries, they will make us uncomfortable. Give you an example, let me, and I'm sure that that's more what Agamban gives example. Let's say, for example, there is a police, right, in the society. What does police do in our society if there is no violence? Right? Think for a second. Okay, what does a police do? Or what is the very idea of a police? When I say police, I does not mean a particular uniform. I mean certain apparatuses which perform the role of a police. What they do in our society, when you see that there is nothing as such anarchy or disorder or let's say anomaly. The reason is that their presence is constantly making us aware that there is a category called normative category which you have to follow constantly. So they are not to manage the disorder. Understand the point? They are not there to manage the disorder. They are there to maintain the order. Right? That's the difference. Right? They are not there to manage the disorder. They are pretty there to maintain the order, which means that they are constantly under the threat that there is any point of time the anomalous structure, like the societal structure that constantly produces anomaly in our society, it can happen any point of time. So understand this, that this anomaly, or let's say uh, deviant structure, available within the structure itself. It's not outside. It's a very much in the society itself. What we try to do, we try to suppress it. We don't allow it to come outside. So it's not outside. It's not that there's something from the outside intervene into us. It's a pretty there within us, which we are not asking or letting it to come outside. So disability or any form of deviance or let's say anomaly is pretty much within us, which we try to project as if it is outside or it is the other. So disability is always the object of institutionalized discourses of control and containment. I deliberately using this kind of idea because I want to constantly make you understand that disability or any minority identity has less to do with the body itself. However, I'm not negating that there is no role of a body. Body has a role, which I'll come into just 2 slides later. So, but the idea what I want to say that the disability is constantly produced. Disability is constantly produced by certain discourses, which is called control and containment. So let's say, for example, if one of you from our classroom, if you do so-called, quote unquote, unruly behavior, the moderator will throw you out, right? Because they will perceive that there is a possibility that the order through which discourse is going on will be disrupted. So the point what I'm making is this, that any point of time which you are so-called good, docile subject, docile student, ruling student, they are constantly under the threat that you can become unruly. So the point is that it's not that they know that you are unruly. It's that they are sensing that there's a possibility of being unruly, which means that the entire societal apparatuses are constantly under the function to tap this unruly behavior, which is not there, which is very much within us. So far given responses are never objective because they are founded upon binary differences that are dismantled by the irreducible operation of a difference. What is a difference? An imbrication of self and other that frustrates separation and distinction, which means that if we are like, suppose if we have understood the concept of a difference, obviously given by Derrida. So it's not only about the language. The idea of a difference is very much applicable in the entire society. So what happens that the moment you are making any separation and distinction, if we apply the idea of a difference over there, we see that at any point of time we won't be able to make this separation and distinctions between self and the other. So one point of time, if you are dealing with the idea of a difference, you will see that self is other, is not that other is from the outside. So otherness is nothing but an interior attribute of embodied self that is not accepted by the sovereign subject of modernity. I mean, these are I can feel that these are theoretically and conceptually a bit a difficult concept. But let me explain to you in a bit. Is this that all the problem is started with the discourse of modernity, right? Most of the problems, and which is why if you go to the Foucault, the birth of clinic, the history of mentality, which means the madness and civilization, the discourse of abnormal that he's more talking about is not talking about and situating in the context of Greek civilization. However, he's very much talking about in the context of enlightenment, which means that most of the problem is started from there. So disability disturbs these normative expectations and destabilizes self-identity. So the expectations that we are supposed to be so-called normal behavior or normal people, this availability of a disability constantly disturbs it. So like how to go about it, right? Now the question is, these are the problems that I'm posing, how to go about it. We can go about it with not by looking at a simple history so far that we have been looking at it, but rather we have to look at the history of our beliefs. We have to look at the history of our value system and also the history of our own representation. So if we are looking at the history of the past, so we are not supposed to, like, let me put it in another word, what Foucault says, genealogy, not the history, genealogy, which means that if we look at the history of our beliefs, our value system, our own representation, then there is a possibility that we can question the entire discourse, the way it has been circulated among us. So now, so disabled people are dehumanized and they are often placed under the rubric of what is the German word, lebenswertes Leben, which means that there is a particular life unworthy of living, right? Which means that there's a particular of life unworthy of living, which means that any particular life that you pick it up, let's say old people, and I'm sure that if you recall the history of Nazism, you will see that the old people were killed like anything. So it's not about that certain that they are targeted that who are disabled, but they targeted who are the particular like certain lives which are unworthy of living. And that is exactly what happens when we notice that we realize that in this modern society, there is a particular people, there are certain set of people who are falling under the rubric of lebenswerte Leben. So we also hear the term that's very commonly associated called useless eaters. And I'm sure that if you read the Malthus in the Victorian times, you can relate what I'm talking about. So Malthus is the one who came up with certain principles that how to control society. And he said that disabled people should not get married. And a lot of I just recommend you that please read Malthus if you want to understand Victorian society and also further. So there are certain set of people, they were categorized as a useless eaters, which means that look at this, what does it, the concept of useless eater do? It gives us a sense that as if we are taking or usurping the right of someone else. So most of such labeling can be explained when we notice that rationalism and utilitarianism are pushed to certain extreme, and any identity are problematized when we started questioning the idea of rationalism and utilitarianism. So most of the time we think that people with disabilities provoke anxiety because of their difference. That's not true. But because they are very much like others, which means other like us, anyone could become one of us. So here I want to also introduce to you that it's not that people are scared about certain minority identity. The reason is they are scared not because what they are, it's not because what they are, but because what they could not become. Look at the distinction what I'm making. It's not because what they are, but it because of what they could not become. And that is where the problem starts. So there is a fear that what if, let's say, for example, since the childhood days, what we do with the children in our school days, like I'm sure we have gone through it, there's constantly pressure that what if our child become like this. He has not become, but he's getting the punishment for the very reason that there is a possibility that we are presuming that one point of time, what if he behave like this, right? So slowly, if you see the way homosexuality discourse is being discussed, the heterosexual parents are very much concerned about their kids, presuming that what if, however, he has not become, what or he is not, what if he fall under homosexual category. So the problem is not what he is or what he going to be, but the problem is that there is constantly fear in us that he may fall at one point of time to that particular category which we are not expecting to, and which is why this what we are addressing to that fear. So the police is there, apparatus of police is there to address that fear, nothing else. So people with disability, they challenge the boundaries of the difference and sameness and spread impurity through normative categories. So labeling them as useless eaters or Lebenswertes Leben is a denial of any commonality with the normative majority. So through this strategy of sameness, so what we try to do in our schools, or let's say in our college days, or let's say education sectors, political sectors, cultural sectors, public institutions, they are constantly trying to produce each one of us as the same. And therefore, they say that that is the only condition where we can promise greater equality. Let's say, for example, look at your society, look at any particular system around, and you will see that if there is idea of non-equality, it is because that there is no strategy of sameness. So if you are like them, then only, I mean, you pick up any particular example, I can give you an example, but I have to talk something more. So let's say, for example, I'm just picking it up to explain it to you, that the idea of inequality, that you are not 18 years old, so you cannot give the right to vote. The idea of equality is this, that first you have to go above 18. So this is the idea of a sameness. It's a one. I'm just picking up one example from our electoral politics. You can pick up many examples from our society where you see that if equality is not being practiced, it is simply because the idea of a sameness is not there. So as long as the idea of a sameness is there is a greater equality. It's promised, right? So disabled people are also under the pressure that they are not like other so-called, and which is why equality is not promised to them. So that is a tragedy. So which means that the construction of docile bodies subject to control, standardization, and predictability is accomplished as an act of social justice. So these are the ideas which I can speak for an hour, but I just want, as a student, you can take it further, which means that social justice can only be established when there is a docile bodies, when subject is ready to be controlled, or let's say, for example, you can be predicted that you are a good student, right? So suppose, for example, when you go for the interview, so the discussion people do is that he has the potential. Look at the sentence that we frame. He has potential to become a good student. So I'm sure that you understand what we mean by good student. So there is a prediction that we make about you, And that is why we give you a particular fellowship or you get some award or so on. So the very idea of social justice is because that you are constructed like a docile bodies, you as a subject can be controlled. There is an idea of standardization which also meet, and there is also condition called predictability. So we must develop a standpoint from where now the issue of pain, desire, and affect can be addressed. So far what we have been doing failed to address the idea of a pain, the idea of desire, or the idea of affect. So these are the key points which I'm making: pain, desire, and affect. So these are the point from where probably we can start thinking again if we want to promise equality and social justice, right? From looking from the angle of the pain, desire, and affect. So there is a desire in majority group to disavow vulnerability that generate anxiety in individual psyche and cultural imaginary. So here we come, I think the last slides, prior to one. So here we have Elizabeth Gross. So now I'm trying to get, I'm going to justify why I use the idea of a liquid body. So look at what Elizabeth Gross has to say about the women, or let's say about the morphology of the women, morphology of the body of a woman. So female corporeality is characterized as a leaking, uncontrollable, seeping liquid, as a formless flow, lacking not so much or simply the phallus, but self-containment. So a formlessness that engulfs all form, a disorder that threatens all order. So that is where I picked up the title called Liquid Body, right? So disability, I'm sure that if you are aware of the way disability politics went ahead, the first time that the feminist movement did not take into the consideration of disabled identity, and later on they joined disability identities, thinking that they are very much like us. And then here comes what Laka is suggesting. It's you can think about it. The book called Aggressivity. So this disarray, this fragmentedness, this fundamental discordance, this essential lack of adaptation, this anarchy, which opens up every possibility of displacement. So what Laka is trying to suggest that there is a trace of our childhood days. Sorry, when I'm saying child in Lacanian terms, it means 0 to 8 months, right? 0 to 6 and then 6 to 12 months. That is how Kristeva make a difference, but Laga goes for 0 to 6 months. So in 0 to 6 months, the body, a child does not find it in a form, a particular, it is formlessness. And that is a particular trace that we carry when we are growing as an adult. So that is what Laka is referring to, that we are narcissistic about of our 0 to 6 months body, and which we are trying to suppress. However, it keeps coming, and which is why when we are thinking as a minority identity or trying to control, it is not we are trying to control something that is outside, but that is what within. So disability is a highly complex and ambiguous category that can be examined by that cannot be examined by binary based models. And any disability, when I'm saying disability, I'm keeping in the mind of a minority identity. However, keeping in the context that I am also aware that every minority identity has a different struggles, but their struggles can be addressed as a disabled through the disability structure. So disability is a site of a multiple psychic and cultural investment, and there is no singular explanation or any certainties. It is always in the position of its undecidability and contingency, which means that if I take the Frederick Jameson's the idea of desire and salvo-zizek, what we interestingly we find that the time in which we are living, in fact, anytime if you say so, we are constantly trying to grow as ego ideal, Lacanian term, However, there would be no point where we can reach to human perfectibility, right? So, which is why, interestingly, if you go to the museums, in most of the museums, if you see a particular statue, you will see that there is a hand, there is no hand, like half bare body with no hands is sitting over there, right? What is the idea of keeping it there is because constantly making you aware that imagine what how good a full body look like, right? If you go to a museum, most of the places when I have been to Europe, I have been observing it that there is a particular statue where there is a beautiful bust sitting somewhere, but there is no hand and there is no leg. The idea from the Lacanian perspective is this, that it is kind of creating a sense that imagine what it would be if it would be complete. So there's a desire that you want to be look like, right? So there's this hate and love, it starts from there. So it's not something that is created from someone else's body. It's very much that we do with ourselves. So that is where I want to stop here with this particular idea. However, I have 10 minutes left, which I want to go for another discourse which I wanted to speak on. Is it okay, Rachna, if I go on for 10 minutes to speak on it?
Certainly, please go ahead. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So, all right. So, see, there are certain things which I wanted to make in a very relation to LGBTIQ, right? So, while it is important to sensitize LGBTIQ plus representation in literature and in the immediate socio-cultural environments, it is also important to be able to face or deal with the direct societal consequence of it, right? So what is happening, what I'm talking about, at one side there is a lot of sensitization. However, we are not aware or we are not concerned about the certain consequence of it. So what I'm going to talk about is mainly about the consequence, which as a responsible citizens and concerned about the LGBTIQ plus category, we need to also address this problem itself. So I'm sure that we all are very familiar with the woke politics, WOKE, woke politics. So this woke culture began in 2010 on a very positive note in trying to create awareness about global issues, movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, feminist rallies, pride parades. So these woke politics aggravated throughout the decade to the extent that a majority of what we call Gen Z woke activists would be confused about what they were actually standing for and against. So I'm also talking about the same idea in one of my book which is coming. So what I'm talking about is that how about this new generation is going to take this up? What if they get confused in this woke culture? So they would embrace so many movements and causes which are tangentially related to their own experience. So understand, I have also talked about in my previous discussion as well that experience is something else and coming from somewhere else is something else. So lot of movements, there's a lot of causes that is being spread in the social media, TikTok or Instagram. We are facing, we are meeting, we are reading and writing about it. But what if they get confused? However, these kind of things are not related to their own experience. They would hardly believe in any one of them with complete earnestness or with understanding of the complexity of identity politics. So it is important to respect to gender identity that a person relates to. Basically, the reason of being gender dysphoria, disability, identity. It's also important to note how this may be misused. That is where my focus is, how this may be misused. And I'm going to pick up certain examples from the real life. So a trans woman is someone, right? Let's say, for example, a trans woman is someone who is biologically assigned male at birth, but later identifies as a woman, right? So essentially the idea being that they are actually women trapped in a male body. So while the experience itself has been seen abundantly, there have also been cases where, because of the loopholes in legal structure, right, because of the loopholes in legal structure or excessive indulgence, I'm using the word excessive indulgence of queer rights, the system has been abused and the ones suffering are nothing but women. So this is what I'm saying, new form of patriarchy, where the women are affected by pseudo trans women, right? Pseudo trans women. So let's say, for example, women have been affected in the arena of sports like swimming, powerlifting, where trans women have entered the women's tournaments and won. And when they could not be in the leaderboards in the men's tournament, right? When they could not won the trophies in the men's tournaments, they went to the participate in the women, and they just said that I identify myself as a woman. So since trans women identify as a woman, nothing can be said against them, as women see their chances at winning in their own category taken away from them, right? So the women could not win anything because now another example is that I'll show you the slide. I'll show you the video as well, but let me finish it off so that you can see the videos at your own ease. So there is a case of a rapist who was taken to the prison, and all he had to do was to just state, I identify as a woman. As a rapist, saying before the jurist that I identify as a woman, and quote unquote, he was treated with the bias that a woman gets in a prison, right? So he was sent to the female prison. He was sent to the female prison instead of male prison. So victim again being women again. So, and there's a third problem. The parents in US schools, they're also concerned that their children are taught about gender even before they get to know about negative integers. The idea is, let's say, for example, if I ask you 2 plus 2, you are going to say is equal to 4, right? If suppose I ask you 2 minus 4 is equal to, I'm presuming, presume that you are not aware of negative integers, so you won't be able to explain. So the point what I'm making is this, that they are being sensitized a particular age when they have no experience at all, when they have no idea what's going on. So the US parents, in fact, they have raised the voice and they are more concerned about it, and the children getting back to home, and they're more confused and crying that they don't know who they are anymore. I mean, they are not able to identify that who they are. So provision for a gender neutral bathroom instead of a separate bathroom for girls and boys, it is also being considered only for the sake of showing that the school authorities care about inclusivity, right? So on the name of inclusivity, see, I'm very much in the favor of inclusivity. In fact, we all are, but we don't want also a woman or a girl becoming victim in a very young age. So now, after saying all this, I'll show you the video in 5 minutes. The speaker might be accused, like people who are raising this voice, as a transphobic. However, we need to draw a line here that transphobia is something, fear of a trans population, right? Transphobia is something called fear of a trans population. So, however, that's a very silly idea to consider if you are raising this voice. It's a more, we are in the favor of trans intolerance, right? So I'm more into not transphobia in a line, but more into the line of trans intolerance, right? So which means that rather than calling transphobic, the better word would be trans intolerance or trans tolerance. That is where we can make some idea. So, which means that is to say that activists, especially in the woke age, often they act as a broken media or paparazzi, right? Paparazzi, where social media is playing a lot of important role, who can easily twist words or fact to stick to a certain narrative that they would like to impose upon the general populace. And in the age of shorts and reels, like 2 second, where in fact I'm talking in the book that how within 2 seconds we are forming our opinion, right? So we are in a quick way that we just read 4 lines and we think that wow, what a wonderful values were instilled into us just by writing 4 lines, right? So this is more to do what I'm saying trans activist phobia, right? Transphobia, I'm having a reservation with it. Trans activist phobia, it works not only for binary people, but also for non left leaning queer folks. So, since they are responsible for creating or upholding the image of an entire community through their words and actions, whereas there may be members of the community who would rather like a peaceful resolutions to most of the issues. Now, let me conclude. The most important thing to keep in the mind is that all of our effort need to be geared towards creating an atmosphere of a tolerance and acceptance for all kinds of people in all kinds of communities and not creating an imposition for any community in any way. So, heteronormative people also constitute a community, a majority, so to speak, right? Now, coming to the second idea, gender pronouns. This would also be respected, especially in public places, but that does not mean that they have to be imposed, right? So, queer rights are important for the society to be able to accept queer tendencies in people, not to enforce them. Dialogue should be built around not just sensitize LGBTIQ, but also to protect this particular culture where we are more moving towards inclusivity. Otherwise, what I'm more scared, and I keep on saying that patriarchy will take over again. Like we are constantly trying to question the patriarchy, but the way we proceed, the kind of a method that we deploy, it is more patriarchal method to impose. So the moment we impose anything, it's nothing but it's becoming another form of patriarchy. So that is what I have to say. I'll just send the links to the message box, right? I'll send those links to the message box, and I'll request, if possible, you can watch it for a second. Just a second. Where is it? Ria, you can ask questions by the time. No issue.
Should I go forward, sir?
I said, Ria, you can ask the question by the time I post those YouTube videos, which I
Yeah.
wanted to show you, but
Okay.
I saw it's already 6. But like you can watch it in your free time. So it
Okay.
is
Am I
just
audible?
I'm raising, nothing else. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, you spoke about the stare and the fact that we view the disabled or the homosexual body as something incorrect or something not something which is not congruous because it is something outside of our identity. With the stare, you mentioned the terminology of stare. If we follow, would
Terminology,
it be incorrect?
terminology,
Stare,
Ria,
stare,
terminology
staring.
of
Stare. You mentioned how we stare at the disabled body. Staring, STARE.
other staring. Right. Ha.
Yeah. So would it be incorrect to say here that if we follow Gail Rubin's idea of the sex hierarchy, so she is mentioning the heterosexual couples or the heterosexual relationship to be also, incorrect or incongruous at times. Like, for example, non-procreative sex, or for example, the act of masturbation. So, are we all disabled then, depending on situations and social institutions? Would it be correct to say that not only the homosexuals or the disabled, but everybody is disabled, depending on whether your sexual practice is following the so-called parameter of acceptance? Would it be incorrect to say that?
Thank you so much, Ria, for bringing this up. That is exactly. I'm happy that you understood. I'm very happy, right? That is exactly the point I was making, right? Because this is exactly the point I was making. That like what you said, like I'm completely second your opinion, nothing else. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. So this is what I think Vivek was arguing, isn't it?
Yeah. I share with you one thing more interestingly because you have brought this up. I told like I was when I was in Hyderabad, IFLU Hyderabad. Uh, like we do a lot of experiments, right? So what we do that I said to one of my friends that you go to the second floor. There is a professor of disability. She is sitting over there, and you can ask her and you can solve your problems. He went over there. He came back by saying that there is no such a professor of disability who is sitting there. I just saw a lady walking and talking over the phone, right? However, there's no such disability. There's no professor of disability studies. So I said that, how did you know this? Then I took him and she said, she's the one who is talking over the phone. She's the one. He said, but she's not disabled from any angle. I said, but how do you know that she's not disabled from any angle, right? So I have a huge problem and reservation with this idea that when you say someone not so called impaired, then only you say that, okay, he is the one or she is the one can talk or occupy disability identity, right? So there is a reservation, right? So which is why most of the time you see that I was not using people with disability or disabled because generally people have perception that a person who is impaired he's only have a disability identity. Rather way around, I more preferably call anomalous body, right? Any anomalous body, which means not accepted in the society because what people feared it could become, right? Not what it is. People feared what it could become. So Ria, I'm happy that you got the point.
Yes, thank you, sir.
I think Elora Sen is someone who has raised hands.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your lecture. It was so interesting. As per your last point, sir, in which you were talking about pseudo trans women, sir, what would be a possible solution to the problem? Because, for example, in Olympic Games and things like that, when the authorities hormone test, like oftentimes it is something that we see a lot of protest over, and even biologically, like cisgender women sometimes can also have high levels of testosterone in their bodies. And this is something that we see in many, especially in the cases of marathon runners, this issue comes quite a lot, with medals being taken away or the rights to participate being taken away. So is there any way around it?
Yeah, I understood. In fact, Elora. Okay, I got your point. Elora, I would give you certain more YouTube videos. I'll tell you interesting the way. That is why I talked about the legal structure, the loopholes of the legal structure. So I'll send you some videos which had explained that how it has been defined, that how you can participate, how you cannot participate. But rather than like what I'm what the solution, if you're looking for, the solution primarily being that the tolerance and acceptance be created, right? Without pushing too hard at imposition to the point that it becomes toxic, right? To the point that it becomes toxic. So to not become a speech police, but understand human weakness with kindness, and rather than hardcore some kind of stance that we take, which generally we see activists generally take. So, and talking about this game or Paralympics or Olympics you were talking about, Elora, I would say that they have to definitely keep these videos or these coming problem into the consideration and frame again so that women should not become the victim of it. That is where I think. So there are more videos. I have almost 10 videos, but these videos are short, which you can watch very quickly. Other videos are a bit long, like 50 minutes, 30 minutes or 15 minutes. So we'll send you more. Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Atul. Go on, Atul.
Yes, am I audible, sir?
Yes, pretty much.
Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture, sir. So in the very beginning, you have mentioned about the idea of negativity, which is associated with disability. So I've read one of the literary critics from the mainstream who have mentioned how Dalits have negative breast while disabled have no breast at all. Sir, in the mainstream
Disabled has?
yes, sir. So in the mainstream literary theory of 1970s, which is actually the peak time for literary theory, there is a mention of body, like we have female body, black body, as such. There are mainstream theories. But when it comes to disabled body, it is excluded from the mainstream. So what could be the reason behind that?
Yeah, I mean, if you see, I mean, that is what the point is that Atul, the answer to this question would be that most of the people did not like to be associated with disability. In fact, Anita Ghai is the one who talks extensively about it in Indian female activism, that the women were not ready to take disability into their own cause, right? Not talking about the reason that they thought that, like the same politics that third world women were kept outside, thinking like the way feminism started in the Europe and other places. So the reason is that, one, they thought that one, because disabled population is hardly 2 point some so and so, so it's not a much concern and it does not bother much to the people. It's hardly few. However, as I say, that there's a huge reservation with the way statistics are formulated or people are counted that they are disabled, right? And I'm sure that if you go to the census, that becomes very funny, the way people come and ask that how many boys you have, how many girls you have, so on and so forth. So that is the one reason that because they people thought that it will hamper our activism, right? If we are going to talk about disability as such with the kind of concern that we have, it will hamper our activism, so we should not touch upon it. And the second reason is also because disability was for time being, like for like long time, as I said, was considered religious model, that the problem with disabled body is nothing but because of it is a medical problem. They should be cured. They should be given some diagnosis and nothing else. Like they should be either should be terminated or they should be, again, like this is a personal problem, right? It's more with a personal individual problem, not a social problem. So like till the disability activism started, people thought it's an individual problem, not a social problem. So we should not talk about it, right? And which is why I have been constantly talking about that what kind of a model that you pick it up, that is going to define what kind of a solutions or a discourse you are going to raise. So which is why I always go with the heuristic method, and where I talk about pain, desire, these things, and they become more vocal and they become more interesting. So that's the reason, Atul, why people did not take it up. Yeah. Sudiksha?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, pretty much.
Sir, during the last of your lecture, you mentioned that in an attempt to resist the patriarchy, we reinstate newer forms of patriarchy. So, can you please elaborate on that? I could not get it.
Okay, I was just simply suggesting that I would suggest that please read Bauman's Liquid Modernity. There's a book by Zygmunt Bauman, Liquid Modernity. So you can note down, you can read later. So what I was talking about, that the way activism is taking place in terms in on the name of gender on the name of certain sensitization or creating awareness, it's nothing, it's an imposition, right? So that is why I constantly reserve this idea that I'm more speaking against like people coming on the social media and speaking more about it. Through WhatsApp, Instagram, media platform, it is reaching to them. However, we are not able to relate with our own experience, right? So let's say, for example, school-going kids have absolutely least idea what we are talking about on the name of LGBTIQ plus. So this is saying this, that it is becoming more imposition, right? So on the as long as you talk about inclusivity, it's a fine, but the moment you impose it, right, as an activism part, right, it's activism part, that becomes more patriarchy, right? So because patriarchy does nothing but impose its own form or structure over to you. So which is why, Sudiksha, I was saying that slowly and gradually, what I could see that even in LGBTIQ plus, there is a politics of which is very much aligning with the patriarchy, right? So it's not sensitization anymore, it's more imposition. That's where the problem lies. So it seems there's a gap, there's a gap, what is happening out like somewhere and what is happening on the practical ground. We are supposed to bridge that.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Prerna, please proceed.
So I hope there are no more questions. Okay, sir, thank you for such an engaging and beautiful session. From the very bottom of our hearts, we thank you, and we are really honored to have you with us today. So let's end the first session, and without any delay, let us start the second session of the day. So what's transgender? The term transgender had been first coined by psychiatrist John F. Olivan of Columbia University. It's 1950. In his 1965 reference work, Sexual Hygiene and Pathology. Like all mythologies, Indian mythology is subject to interpretation. Taking examples from a very interesting book called Shikhandi and Other Tales, we get an insight of the existence of fluidity of gender in our Hindu tales, some examples being Shiva, who included the female in his male body, Ram, who welcomed all in his kingdom, including Hijras, Vishnu, who became a woman to enchant gods and demons, and Kali, who became a man to enchant milkmaids. So, let us welcome our second speaker of the day, Dr. Akshay Kirat. Dr. Akshay Kirat specializes in religion and sexuality. His articles and monographs have appeared in Kavya Bharati, Journal of General Studies, South Asian Research, Explicator, Rupkatha, etc. His interests include historical texts of the colonial period, with a special focus on the discourse of criminality. An associate of IIAS Shimla, Dr. Rath has completed a major research project sponsored by ICSSR New Delhi, researching the history of convict transportation with a focus on the Andaman penal settlement. His current sponsored project, Restoring the Sacred in Public Spheres from IMPRESS ICSSR, seeks to unravel transgender religion in India. He has been a visiting scholar at University of Louisville, USA. Across the Blackwater, the Andaman Archives is his most recent book. He pursued his PhD in the year 2011 from University of Hyderabad. He is currently an associate professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Bhubaneswar, and his topic for today is the transgender figure in Indian archives. Welcome, sir. You may proceed.
Um, Thank you so much. If there were Amitabh Bachchan here, he would begin by stating Devi and Sachin probably. Nilatrida would agree. He's there. And Vivek. Uh, Vivek spoke about identity, discourse, justice, fear, subject, problematized some of the concepts. In the next couple of minutes, I'll be reading a couple of tales from Indian mythology. I'll be talking about religion a bit, Indian nationalist discourse a bit, and colonialism in India a bit. I'll just refer to them. I'll be reading a couple of tales which have been popular, which we get in public domain, and I shall be focusing not on transgender as a whole, rather I shall be talking a little bit about Hijra, the way we have used the term, the way we have seen them and made a clear distinction between them and us. And just like I said a couple of seconds ago, Devyama and Sajjana, that is where we begin. So most of the people, when they speak about Indian transgender, Indian Hijra in particular, they speak of one tale. The tale is from Ayodhya, it's from the Ramayana, and Rama is exiled. This is the context. On the bank of river Sarayu, he bids farewell to his subjects. He says, O men and women of Ayodhya, go back home from here. I'll complete the exile period, I'll return to you, then I'll rule over you. And so Rama left. In the meantime, the major stories of Ramayana, they take place. Sita is abducted, Rama and his army, they fight a great battle, and finally Sita is rescued, they return. Rama, Sita, Lakshman, they all return along with the army. On the back, on the way back, on the bank of River Sarai, they see that some people are still waiting for Rama to return. The men, women, they have left. Only a few people they wait for his arrival, and they have grown nails, hair, and have become something like trees, tree trunks, with the years of waiting. Rama sees them. He asks for a reason. They reply, O Rama, you bid farewell to the men and women of Ayodhya. We are the Hijras of Ayodhya, and you never addressed us. So we are still waiting for your return over here on the bank of the river. Rama was so touched by their devotion that he blessed them. O Hijras of Ayodhya, your blessings and curses would come true. I do not know who conceived this particular tale, whether we or they, but A.K. Ramanujan, he talks about it in Who Needs Folklore. And he gives another example. After that, Rama tells them, you will rule India for 100 years in the future as the Congress party members. So there's this satire, there's this humor, there's this serious humor attached to what A.K. Ramanujan talks about. So whether we are addressing some people, whether we are addressing our people as men and women, these are categories that we need to rethink, we need to reestablish. So in the last couple of years, what I have been doing is I am talking to people that I meet, in particular the Hijras who cross-dress, who have this signature clapping, who beg, who dance, and I am trying to collect the tales that they narrate. And the tales range from mythology, Indian mythology, Indian epics, to the modern tales and how they have responded to situations in India, like the freedom struggle movement. I don't know whether Gandhi uh, actually took any of the Hijra to his cause for freedom and accommodated him. And he happens to be declared as the father of the nation, not declared but identified or spoken. So, in the next couple of minutes that I'll be talking, I'll be reading a couple of lines from the tales that I have gathered, and we shall meaning of them. We shall make meaning of them. We shall ask a couple of questions, and that is where we are going to part. This is the first tale that I could collect. It's from a place called Sambalpur. Sambalpur is my native place. It's famous like that of Banarasi saris. We got Sambalpuri saris, we got Sambalpuri fabrics. And during Shiva's marriage to Parvati, every year we enacted hundreds and hundreds of people, those who identify themselves as Hijras. They come, they sing, they dance. They also do some sex work. They earn a living, they earn a lot of money, and they live. So this is the time period when I collect the stories, and it is reenacted every year. Here was the story. In the beginning, there was darkness. It is from the darkness that the Creator came into being. The Creator God had embedded within him both feminine and masculine principles. Aimlessly did he wander above water, and then came his finest sense of consciousness. He thus created the world, he created the first men and women and segregated them according to their sexes. In his creation, those who possessed both feminine and masculine principles were closest to the Creator God's heart because they were the fortunate ones displaying the Creator's traits. They, at once male and female and still beyond sex and hence pure, possessed the power to bless and curse. An insatiable jealousy came to the heart of the males and females, and the fortunate ones were looked down upon by those who were relatively distant from the Creator God. Gradually, they worshipped the primordial mother goddess and identified themselves with the feminine principle, who in turn had identified herself with nature and other creations. So begins the creation tale of one of the transgender tales in Sambalpur, Odisha, where thousands of Hijras they assembled to perform during Lord Shiva's ritual marriage to Sati's incarnation Parvati every summer. They sing, they dance, and they perform in praise of the Lord, who is performing a second marriage to produce an heir, who will in turn save the universe from, say, an otherwise irreligious world. One of their songs centralizes their hopes and impediments, and I have tried to translate it for you. I quote, we came to the world and served. The world is not ours, the world is finished. We came to the world and realized, start it forth. There is no revolution here, but there is always a revolution within these tales that I am talking about. What is its purpose? When we move forward hearing this song, Babar is without his Babri. And the transgender figure becomes the prototype of a gopi girl, a Mirabai looking for Krishna from the other shore of Yamuna. This movement they term a woman in her eternal migration is without a tongue or language. Then comes Shankara dancing his cosmic dance. So many roles and so many episodes are described in these tales, in these songs, and it is the everlasting dance of the cosmic world. Should we not then term transgender narratives as an epic song about the world within the world? Because we haven't produced enough transgender literature by now, and there is a vacuum. Since these tales and songs of the transgender community are not far from being influenced by biblical and other mythological narratives, it's wise to term them as a literary cultural hybrid of colonial expansion and modernism, and I'll talk about it a bit later on. More than that, just as folk narratives contain multitudes, transgender narratives possess the emblem of life and death, sorrow and happiness, identity and state of being, and they are inextricably intertwined. Apparently, the integral motive of transgender narratives, motive that transgender narratives seek to achieve while creating an alternative universe and a gendered identity is that They unearth the hidden and buried life through their personal narratives and autobiographies by domesticating pan-Indian gods and goddesses, just like the other tale that we heard a couple of minutes ago. Right over there, they are taking Ram as a character and they are situating their life so that they will make sense of the contemporary world. And they need to remain historical, they need to stay historical also. So it is an origin tale of everyday life narrative. Once the motif is established, it is contextualized with and against gender duality, and it seeks to revisit its alternatives also. So right over here, what folk songs, narratives, they sought to do in the context of the world, its creation, its substance, transgender songs and narratives, they sought to do in the context of the world, its creation and also substance. But in this context, there is this element of religion, element of characters, mythology, and the creation of an alternative universe. In this particular tale, in this particular song, for instance, the creator god could collaborate with the daily affairs of the devotee who may have been perceived as a prostitute or dancer, a kidnapper, a beggar, a thief, or a guard, and who could occasionally become successful in bringing dignity to the community, dignity in the sense what we are using these days. Furthermore, these narratives are sociocultural texts having the elaborate potential to establish what is the transgender discipline in the modern context, in the Indian context. What we have at this point of time is a couple of anthropological studies on transgender community, a couple of modern autobiographical pieces which have come to our fore by say mainstream printings like Penguin, Rupa, and others, and we got a handful. We have 2 to 3 books, booklet study on transgender people, particularly on histories, and we haven't produced enough. They also haven't produced enough in our sense of the term, like we are doing in our academic field. So that's the end of the second tale. I shall come to the third tale, and this is not a tale, this is history of what Gandhi did to the transgender community, particular to his race. And then we shall make sense of how we are leading to. It's from November 1946 to February 1947. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, now he's known as the Mahatma, the father of the nation, he spent his days in and around communal riot-affected Noakhali, located in the then East Bengal of India. Now it's in Bangladesh. At the fag end of his life, Gandhi performed Brahmacharya experiment turned Mahayagya by sleeping naked with his private physician Sushila Nair, Abha Gandhi, and with his 19-year-old grandniece. Surrounded by extensive killings, forced conversion of Hindus to Islam, rapes, looting, Gandhi tested the ultimate truth of his life, his faith in Brahmacharya, to eschew communal violence and restore the spirit of peace and harmony in India. This is what by Walpole. Despite other women's contribution, Manu became the sole performer in Gandhi's ultimate self-sacrifice, and she joined Gandhi in Noakhali and served him for physical and spiritual progress. She bathed the Mahatma, massaged his naked body, and shared his bed at night. And the Mahayagya to control sexuality, to throw away sexuality from Gandhi's life in his own point of view, of course, it started. This act of Gandhi generated a lot of controversy indeed. His stenographer Parshuram, for instance, self-humiliated and shamed, resigned from his service on the 1st of January 1947. Parshuram complained against this practice, and on 2nd of January 1947, Gandhi wrote to him stating that Parshuram had misunderstood the act of Brahmacharya and that, I quote, he was at liberty to leave him today, meaning that day. unquote. Surrounded by controversies and deeply wounded by unprecedented levels of communal unrest in Noakhali and other parts of India, of course, Bihar and so on, Gandhi sought advice from many of his well-wishers and compatriots. To his disciple Vinoba Bhave, for instance, he wrote on 10th of February 1947 to defend himself against the public outrage over his involving of Manu and other women in his brahmacharya experiments. On 25th February, Bhave responded expressing his disinclination to agree with Gandhi's subject position, but just like less people argued with Gandhi, he did not argue. Gandhi sought his long-term Calcutta compatriot Satish Mukherjee to endorse this experimentation, and Mukherjee stayed silent. In addition, Gandhi's Bengali interpreter, Nirmal Kumar Bose, opposed his ideas, and probably he was the only one who directly opposed the idea. The heat of the debate increased, and subsequently, Manu withdrew herself and alienated herself from the controversy as well. And Gandhi worried much about her anxiety, sickness, and listlessness. This personal storm shook the Mahatma, the public image of the Mahatma, and Gandhi sought to self-examine his faults. Though sidelined, shamed, and worried, Gandhi was relentless about the importance of this experiment, and defended it as a potent means of his self-transformation into what he termed as God's eunuch, and this is our subject begins. At a prayer meeting on the 1st of February 1947 at Ahimsapura in Noakhali, Gandhi was reported as the Prophet, meaning Prophet Muhammad, has discounted eunuchs who became such by operation. Those who probably do not know, the word hijrah comes from hijr, and it's the flee of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina, and that's the time when the eunuchs they guarded the Kaaba. But he welcomed eunuchs made such through prayer by God. This is what Gandhi said. His was that aspiration, and that is the level of aspiration that Gandhi could probably aspire and wanted to achieve. The idea of God's eunuch was Gandhi's ultimate form of making his body as an instrument of nonviolence for attaining undivided freedom. There is no valid record on whether Gandhi was approached by any Hijra, any eunuch, or a member of the transgender populace, or he accommodated them in the making of his moral nation, the moral nation he tried to create, from which he, of course, excluded prostitutes. He did not take donations from them, but he could accommodate a Devadasi who eventually married, or she had married a Brahmin man, MS Subbulakshmi, and their association was quite good for a very long time. They could raise money, they could do something very productive. Whether or not he embraced a real eunuch who cross-dressed, danced with her signature claps, and by then belonged to the criminal lot. This criminal lot will come to in a while, or whether or not he sought to accommodate them in the freedom struggle movement or his moral nation, it's wise to term that the Mahatma and the eunuch they crossed each other's territory in conceptual and spiritual realms. Their collaboration created a national ideology of purity and morality, and this is where I come to the fourth part of my tale. This nationalist ideologue of eunuchism propagated by Gandhi could create a nation with an indigenous identity standing tall and parallel to what Britain conceived Indian people as less masculine, feminine, and then colonialism acted that way. The bipolar identity, in fact, is attributed to both the land and its son. Bharat, as the land is named after Bharat in most mythological tales, the mythological character or the mature son of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta replicates the masculine image to subjugate the virility of the colonial forces. It's upon castrating Bharat that the land receives the image of a mother or Mother Durga or Goddess Motherland as shown in colonial literatures, anti-colonial literatures, say Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, and thus in uniting polarity, it influences the freedom struggle movement of the 19th and 20th century India. Hence, the fatherland is turned into a motherland during this period, particularly in this ideologue. While the clarion call of nonviolence by Gandhi it unifies the polarity within each son of the motherland, instilling more power within them than the singular masculinity of the British. Close to India's independence, with a decrease in sexual virility and procreative impulses, the Mahatma declares himself a complete brahmachari and self-identifies with Hijras. The parallel of this nationalist struggle for a conceptual celibacy is distinctly visible in another transgender tale. This time, probably this tale is from the transgender community itself. This time, it is about the action of the transgender goddess, the benevolent Bahuchara Mata that the community in some parts of Gujarat they worship. And this particular deity is seated on a rooster that symbolizes probably innocence. And some time ago, when Bahuchar Mata, the deity, was circling the universe, and here the story goes, she had blessed the Hijra community and accepted to be their protector, though they could occasionally bring honor to the community or to the deity. The community of Hijras idealized her because she was the icon of the oppressed and was the direct manifestation of cosmic energy, Shakti. And the story goes now, one day a dark old man who was a devotee of Durga prayed to her for a celestial boon. It was dark times and the world was full of oppressive powers, and the old man had taken a vow to free the world from evil forces. As his prayers remained on her, the grand old man attempted to castrate himself, and there appears the goddess on the innocent rooster. She was so touched by the depth of his devotion that she granted him boons, but warned him of staying like a Hijra his entire life. As a result, with the deity's blessings and a castrated mind, the old man fought great evil forces with no powers, no weapons whatsoever. He brought great freedom to his people and the universe and remained an icon for all those who were oppressed by evil powers. The old man never forgot the warning of the goddess and preached the ideal of Bhoja Mata of castration, rejection of violence throughout his life. This time, it is about the action of the transgender goddess, the benevolent Bhoja Mata, who is seated on a rooster that symbolizes innocence. Now, who is this great legendary old man fighting for his cause, portrayed in this transgender lore? One would not go far but understand what Gandhi sought to do. Gandhi's desire to be God's eunuch within the context of nationalist discourse, and in accepting it as a way of living, Gandhi symbolically becomes a transgender icon. So, on the one hand, Gandhi trying to become a eunuch first mentally and then physically. I shall give you a quote of how Gandhi spoke about them. I quote from Complete Works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 79. Gandhi says, I deliberately want to become a eunuch mentally. If I succeed in this, then I become one physically also. That alone is true brahmacharya. I saw an opportunity and seized it. The second quote, and there are multiple quotes. He, meaning a brahmachari, should be a man who has made himself a eunuch. If the person is a woman, she should not be conscious of it at all, of being a woman. Gandhi being Gandhi, he could speak like this, but our point of contention when we are speaking with our young scholars, those who are in their BA and MA, and they would hold projects, they would speak about the communities, they would speak about rights, they would speak about integrity, they would speak about how we are going to live in an inclusive world. These are actually potential research fields that our young scholars need to keep in mind. You would be writing probably projects, you would be taking that to your life narrative of how to interact with communities who are there. We need to talk to them, we need to bring them to the fore. This is how Vivek probably spoke, but we need to live in a universe that's inclusive. That is how Vivek actually concluded. But our job right over here is to see what kind of a history that we have created, what kind of a history the transgender community, particularly eunuchs and hijras, they are creating, and how are we responding to them, how are they responding to what we have done of this world. So during the colonial period, this is during 1871, that India, under its colonial rule, they enacted the Criminal Tribes Act, which brings me to the last section of my uh, talk now. The Criminal Tribes Act, after criminalizing certain tribes, and this was the philosophy: once a criminal, always a criminal, and if you are a criminal, then your children, your grandchildren, the next generations of people will be criminals. And if you are a criminal, the entire village could be a criminal. This is how the Criminal Tribes Act acted. Part second of this act of 1871 responded to and spoke about the eunuch communities in India, put forward registers to destabilize them, to restrict their movement. Probably they were the vagabonds, they were the people who were migrating from one province to another, one district to another, and the colonial authorities got less clue about their movement and could not track. So this particular act becomes significant, and our scholars, our students, those who are here, they need to also look for the mythology, the religious tales, the songs, the origin tales, and how we have started seeing the transgender community, particularly trans women, whom we label as hijras in our context. Those who sari clad, they get this signature clad, they go beg in railway stations, in railways, and other places. How they have started behaving in that manner, and they are running from here to there for a 10 rupee note, and that is what we have seen of them. And we haven't seen the great legacy that they have created, the mythology that they have created, the songs that they sing. We haven't documented them. So probably some of the scholars would uh, get engaged in these activities, and that is how I would like to start. Thank you. If there are questions, then I would be happy to uh, address them.
Sir, Ria Basu has a question.
Should I go forward?
Yes.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for your lecture. I just wanted, I don't know whether I missed this point or not because of technical errors, but I've also read about the Kuvagam festival, which is celebrated in the southern parts of India. So, and how Ruth Vanita and Salil Kidwai in their book Same Sex Love in India talk about it being one of the greatest or one of the largest amalgamations of South Asian transgender identity. So, can you give, are there any such other references of festivals where there is such large congregation of transgender people getting together on a local level or on more of like a regional festival?
Uh, there are indeed. The first festival that I was referring to is in Sambalpur. The transgender meaning the eunuchs, particularly those who cross dress, they gather in Sambalpur every year, and that's one of the major festivals about which we have spoken less in this world, and that's during when Shiva marries Parvati during summer. And of course, there is this South Indian festival that you referred to. There is this Bauchar Mata festival in parts of Gujarat. These are some of the festivals which have come to my knowledge. Besides that, probably Niladida would be in a position to mention one or two if he's there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Um, any other?
Sir, I have another question here. I don't know whether I'm allowed to do so.
Please go ahead.
So, like for example, if you're talking about the festivals that you mentioned or the one that I talked about, these may be done by those the Hijra community who are primarily following the Hindu religion. But are there any instances where they are not following the Hindu religion? For example, if they belong to Christian religion or let's say the Islamic traditions.
Uh, I would disagree if we say that they have one particular religion because you would see that the Hijra community, particularly, they might be from several religions, but they come in terms when they make a society, they form a society, they go through certain rituals. In our context, we have tried to uh, bring them to the threshold of Hinduism because the terms that they have borrowed is something like nirvana in the Indian context. And we have probably told them, we have probably told them because we are the people who are producing knowledge about them, knowledge within quotes. They are not the ones, they have documented that knowledge which we read in our Indian context. So probably that's how you say that they belong to Hindu religion. But when you start analyzing, probably it's Hinduism, but that it's not Hinduism, but that bit different. But you can well see people, those who were born in a Muslim household and still going forward with Bauchar Mata, still going forward with the concept of castration, labeling it as nirvana, and so on and so forth. So, stating that they are Hindus or they are Muslims or they are Christians, bringing them to the threshold of the transgender community probably would be an ideal one rather than labeling them as uh, belonging to a particular religion at this point of time.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Rachman, should I proceed? Sir, I think everyone's doubts have been cleared. Thank you so much for such an insightful session. We're honored to have you among us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, should I conclude the meeting?
Yes, please go ahead.
So let us conclude this session by thanking our respected guests, Dr. Vivek Singh and Dr. Akshay Kirat, for joining us, the principal of Vasanta College for Women, Dr. Alka Singh, professors Dr. Rachna Pandey, convener of Spectrum, Dr. Akanksha Trivedi, Dr. Rishika Jain, Dr. Shaurav Kumar Singh, and Dr. Sunita Arya, and the student members of our club Spectrum. As I would also like to thank every other member who decided to join us today and are attending this 5-day course, this certificate course. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you and have a great day ahead.
I request participants to please stay back. We are sharing the feedback form. Feedback form has been shared in chat box. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Please fill in the feedback form and kindly join tomorrow's session at 2:15. So please mark the time. It will start at 2:15 and we'll have two sessions which will be over by 4:15 or 20. So please be on time. Thank you so much. Again, I have shared the feedback form. Please fill it.
Ma'am, it's again of yesterday.
Just give me 1 minute, please.
No, we are sending. Please wait. I have again shared the feedback form for today. Please fill it. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience.
I think we are trying to fill up the feedback form, but the it still appears as the form for a previous day. The names of the resource persons are not what we heard today. Can you please check and let us know, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, should we wait for the new one or should we fill this one only?
Sir, please wait. Just wait, sir. We are checking. Really sorry. We have sent the form again and we have re-edited the form also. You can go ahead and fill the feedback form. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we are ending the meeting. We have shared the form in a group also, a WhatsApp group. So you can fill it from there as well. Thank you so much.